Yes, this is the September Hangout. Joining us so far is Johnny and David. Hello, guys.
Sorry, spaced out. No pun intended.
Yeah, I figured I'd better go ahead and do this before the hurricane rolls in. It's not supposed to be a hurricane by the time it comes to this point, but it should probably be like a tropical storm or something. But I might be underwater, so if there's no podcast this weekend, just wait until it all drains. It'll be back.
This whole Article 11 and 13 nonsense.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Dankula and Sargon have already posted a lot about those. Yeah, and it does seem like there's more action in the chat. Let me share that. Okay, now you can all see. Executioner, you've co-hosted the podcast too, so you can use that link in the Discord to come and join us if you want.
All right, let me just start by saying that my opinion on the EU has gone from bad to worse. I initially thought they were just a bunch of socialist status types, but I just now realize that they are a bunch of pro-censorship, anti-free speech, anti-free internet useful idiots who have no place in civilized society. Their argument is that we resorted to ending fascism in the middle of the 20th century, and we did, but the same could be said about communism. And not only did we fight wars over both, we were a major component in the fall of the USSR, the most totalitarian and red government the world has ever seen. And the fact that they even considered doing this on such a massive level just goes to show how desperate these statists are to control everything.
Well, and it seems to me it's more of the European Commission doing it, because from what Dankula was saying, the MEPs, they tried to ask him about it, and the MEPs didn't even know anything about it. They hadn't even read it. You know, like we keep talking about here, politicians are just passing things based on what other people tell them, you know, the little soundbite. Oh, yeah, this will be great for content makers. And by content makers, of course, they mean the big media groups, not a small fry. But, you know, they just bought into it. They didn't bother reading it. They didn't bother, you know, trying to get any other. They could not talk at all knowledgeably about what's actually in the thing. Of course, I could mention downsized DC's Read the Bills Act, because it was like when the it was the Patriot Act in 2001. Not
right
only
after
did
the Twin Towers hit, my friend.
Yep. Not only did the House pass without reading it, the House voted on it before there was even a copy available for them to read.
Oh, hi, ancap Jason Voorhees. I mean, Executioner.
That's an executioner's mask, not a hockey. It's Dapperton that has a hockey mask. Ancap Deist Artist says the EU is slowly becoming a blue-flagged version of China. The difference is China's cutting itself off from the internet. Everyone else is cutting Europe off, because first there's all this GDPR stuff. And I actually got this. It was some kind of weird screw-up with one of the news sites. I forget.
All right,
what it was,
did he just clone himself? What's going on here?
Executioner clone. There's two of them. Oh my god. But yeah, I had to find a link to another Bogosity story last week, because one of the news sites kept coming up and says, "You're in Europe and we can't give you our website because of GDPR." And I'm like, I'm not in Europe.
Yeah, he's in North Carolina, people.
It's IP-based geolocation. It doesn't work for crap.
That's Pyro!
Are you my mommy?
It's ancap Pyro!
Our first Doctor Who reference of the night.
Hello, are you my mommy?
Uh,
I can't wear the filter because there's asbestos in here.
Yeah, at my school we have to do like a project at the end of the year to show community and stuff like that. So I chose to teach 7th and 8th graders and even seniors cybersecurity.
Cool.
They are actually allowing me to teach a class.
I think it's over again, but it was like a month or two ago. Humble Bundle did that thing where you get a lot of, you know, the cybersecurity books, and they'd done the same thing last year, and I picked them up, and so they might do it again. So keep an eye out for it. Yeah, but there's all sorts of great ones from like Bruce Schneier and Kevin Mitnick and all sorts of greats.
At my school, that was today we did like the whole college process, you know, the federal aid, that type of stuff. And the person was saying our admissions whatever advisor said, oh, if you have a password, store it on your phone, which, okay, that isn't as bad, but store it on a piece of paper somewhere. And I'm like, no.
Well, it kind of depends. Don't store it on a piece of paper and tape it to the monitor or something like that. But if you've got like a master password that for your password vault, and it would be disastrous if you lost it, then you can write it down and put it with your secure papers, like your birth certificate, your social security card, all your important stuff. That it would be disastrous if it got away from you. And
but she was saying, like, write down your username and password on, like, a sticky note and place it somewhere. And I'm like,
no.
Depends on the place, you know. But,
I mean, if you've got a place where only you have access to, you know, it's fine. You know, the Chinese aren't going to hack it or anything like that. So,
yeah, they've taped it under their keyboards.
Yeah, that's another popular one. That's what a lot of people do. They like, you know, go through office buildings, looking on monitors, looking at their keyboards, and they get passwords. You know? They get a job with like the cleaning crew or something like that, and then they go through and get everyone's passwords. That's happened.
My operating system was booting there, Windows 98.
98, huh? That's retro.
It was in school. I don't know how, but we had to write a kind of like a 6-word memoir, what Ernest Hemingway did or whatever. And we had to write one about 9/11. And I said, tragedy and aftermath, Congress molested freedom.
Yep, that's pretty much it.
It's funny because it's true.
My teacher looked at me with the most glaring look as I was walking out of the classroom at the end, and I'm like, but it's true. And somebody else had one that was worse. They said, conspiracy, Bush did 9/11.
Oh, God. No, but yours is kind of like that episode of Parks and Rec when, oh, God, I'm drawing a blank on the guy's name, but the libertarian character talks to that little girl about government, and after he's done with her, she writes a report on how government works, and it's just 2 words. It doesn't.
Yep.
Ron Swanson, that's his name. Yeah, I missed having a show with a character that's that blatantly libertarian. He was great.
I actually was able, I think a couple days ago, I was debating a statist at my school.
Pardon me, gentlemen. I gotta get some...
There were a lot of statists at my school, and I was debating one, and they pulled out 4 things in a row. The no true Scotsman, the Tin Man fallacy. They pulled out a whole bunch of stuff. They pulled out the... damn it, I'm missing one of them. Basically, they were pulling every straw man out of the book, and I said, in a society where there's private security, in our society, as in the current society we have now, a police officer can get away with shooting an unarmed black man. But in the society I'm proposing, the market would basically not allow that to happen, since that person couldn't get a job afterwards, and after that it would just be more accountable. And the person straw manned me and said, so in your system you can shoot unarmed black men without consequences?
So you're saying... Yeah.
Yep. He did that, and there was actually this person who I thought was a statist, one of my friends, and she just kind of just intervened and said taxation is theft. And believe it or not, she's a voluntarist communist. Believe it or not.
Wow, how does that work?
I have no idea. She believes in voluntarism and believes in the concept of people can have their communes, just don't force it on other people. Basically,
well, I mean, that's capitalism. You know, when you're talking about things like that, it's not about what you would want to do. It's about what you will tolerate others doing. So what would she do if other people on their property are doing things the capitalist way? If she would just let them do it, then she's a capitalist because she respects private property. But communism is based on the idea of private property being theft. Holding private property to a communist is itself an act of aggression. So
And believe it or not, she used to be like an anti-gunner. She hated guns and all this stuff, but then I went on to say about how the society would work and people would be armed and stuff like that. And she totally did a 180 and agreed with it. And I'm like, wow. How in the hell does that work?
So she just kind of goes along with whoever's in the room at the time.
I'm not really sure, though. She kind of did say, I kind of explained how most school mass shootings are actually events where it's an accidental discharge of a firearm and nobody gets hurt pretty much, but they count it as such. And there was a guy who kind of walked away saying, nope, that's not true. Then she heard me out, and when he came back, she kind of went, well, if you heard him out, he's actually speaking the truth and stuff like that. So it's kind of interesting. The thing is, when internet started out, it was a glorified radio service in a way, but then it kind of evolved over time when the private market took it over.
Yeah, but the problem is, since they were using the public telephone packet switching network, the FCC said you can't use the protocols you're developing. You have to use, this protocol that ended up becoming TCP/IP, and it wasn't built for that.
Yeah.
And if they'd use some of these other, I've talked about this before, they'd use some other protocols with like a proper session layer and everything else where we could do real authentication, then like there would be no such thing as spam email, because spam email relies on the sender being anonymous, and you wouldn't just be able to slip it in like they do.
It's like they wanted to make it unreliable.
Well, they were just using it to communicate between them, and they all knew each other, and they knew that none of them were going to misbehave. This is like 20 people or something like that. It wasn't meant to do banking on or anything like that.
I hate when the moon landing hoaxer freaking people say, oh, we couldn't have gone to the moon with the computer of a calculator, and I'm like, we could, because it's just different things back then. They just needed one goal to be accomplished.
Well, and all they need to do is just resolve equations on it. That's pretty much all they used it for. They used, pencils and paper for everything else.
Yeah.
I mean, the only real difference between that and the computers of today is that instead of getting it, in a few seconds, you can get it in a few billionths of a second. And it's like, well, okay, what difference would that have made for the moon landing?
Yeah. It's like they say, oh, we have lost the technology to go to the moon. No, we've only lost the plans to build the Saturn V. It doesn't mean we don't have the technology to go back to the moon.
I don't even think it's the case that they've lost the plans. It's just that no one's really going to make it.
Yeah.
Because it's outdated. If someone was going to do something, they design a new rocket, they wouldn't use the Saturn V.
Yeah.
Newbies have always been weird about computers because they show these crazy interfaces that could never exist and you can never really work with. And they say, because it's visual, because real computer screens are boring. And yet, I think Mr. Robot was really the first one to start doing them realistically. And they're showing you, actual hacker utilities being run and stuff like that. And it works.
Yeah. I've seen like the movies like The Matrix where they're doing the hacking and stuff like the computers, and it's just strings of text and stuff like that, like just like flowing downwards. And I'm like, that's not how it works though.
Well, The Matrix, I mean, who knows what time that is, and the machines have their own completed. So, I mean, who knows how that would work. They weren't actually 1999 computers. It was at least a few centuries in the future.
Yeah. The thing about The Matrix, though, I think I'm going to do a video on it. They have, like, the Animatrix, which is, like, they have a story about how the machine war started.
Oh, all of the Animatrix is good. If you haven't seen it, definitely get the Animatrix.
And I've watched it, and I kind of criticized part of it for the part of the economic part of it, where, the machines are outproduced.
All right, guys.
Okay.
All right, see you, Johnny.
The machines are outproducing humans, and therefore the humans went to war and stuff like that. I understand that with the government part, but if anything, the machines wouldn't have replaced them in many other jobs. There would have still been jobs for humans.
Yeah, I think what you have to keep in mind about that is that one was like an educational video to let the people of Zion know what had happened. And that was what they were able to discover about the past. It's not really the truth. It's just what they were able to find out about it. So, they had to kind of go from scratch. They didn't have any records to go from. They've had to kind of deduce all of that.
Yeah. It's very interesting, though, part of it where the machines, they decide to use humans as power, even though there is plentiful nuclear material around the world at that point. Which at that point, it kind of, when it shows, the prototypes of them being plugged in, I think one machine, they have artificial intelligence, I think one machine should have just been like, wait, why are we taking 80,000 prisoners of war and making them into a power plant when we could just take their old nuclear reactors?
Well, and if you think about it, it's a kind of perpetual motion anyway that wouldn't work. But, I mean, again, we're just talking about what the people of Zion were able to discover about it. And, I like the fan theory that what they were really using them for was while they were in the Matrix doing all of that, they were also using unused portion of their brains as processing power for the fusion reactors.
That could make sense.
Because Morpheus did say it was combined with the form of fusion.
Yeah, there's actually a theory by Game Theory where they kind of think that the Matrix is just one part of kind of like a layered network where they created a Matrix to trick people into believing that they could get out of the Matrix when they're still in the Matrix, because Neo can still do the powers and such even out of the Matrix.
I didn't think he ever did any of that when he was outside of the Matrix.
I think he did it in the second movie. Like, he kind of like stops one of the machines or whatever.
Yeah, but I was kind of waiting for that, the reveal that the real world in Zion and all that was part of another simulation on top of that, and the computers were just fooling them. But
yeah. They wanted to do that, but the studios thought that people were too dumb to understand that.
Well, they did it with, oh God, what movie was that? Where you had the dreams inside the dreams inside the dreams?
Inception, yeah.
Yeah. They did it there, and I mean, it worked, and people were able to follow it. There just seems to be this kind of elitism in Hollywood. It's like, there was one time, oh God, I forget what it was, but Penn Jillette was talking about working with an exec on something, and he was like, oh, people aren't going to understand that. It's like, what do you mean? It's simple. It's like, well, you and I understand that, but you have to understand that, the people in Nebraska aren't going to understand it. And I mean, he said something like, what people in Nebraska are you talking about? Are you talking about the people in Nebraska who are doing brain surgery, programming computers, and all this other stuff,
Yeah.
And I mean, it's really amazing just how wrong they've ended up being, because, they kept telling them for the longest time, each episode has to be, completely self-contained. Most TV shows from like the 60s, 70s, 80s, you could take all the episodes, throw them in a pile, pull them out, watch them in a random order, and it would still make sense. And that's one thing they kept saying to JMS, Joe Straczynski, when he made Babylon 5, was like, oh, people aren't going to be able to follow that. And now that's kind of the model. You've got Breaking Bad and Orange is the New Black and shows like that, which that's what it's all about. Game of Thrones is basically going to be whatever it is, 80 some hour long movie is basically what it is.
Yeah, usually at my school, I'm not really afraid to be unfiltered. Kind of in a way, I'll say whatever, I'll say what I want to say, and I don't really care about other people's kind of opinions about it, be it like status and stuff like that. When I say openly taxation is theft and I explain it, I don't care if a statist is like, oh my gosh, if there weren't taxes, how would there be schools? And I'm like, let me show you.
Oh, and I mean, it's like in this country, there weren't any taxpayer-supported schools for like 100 some odd years. Mostly they were community schools. You got the image of the little one-room schoolhouse, but what you did was you had people in the community they're like, hey, we got these kids, we need to teach them. So they just all get together and chip in and, help build the schoolhouse. And, they'd hire the teacher, or one of them would volunteer to be the teacher. And they just did it as a community, and just everyone just voluntarily chipped in.
Yeah. And that made a lot of sense. Or just allow teachers to conceal carry, because it's, I even told them the statistics. An armed citizen stops a shooting with only 1 death, while police intervene and ends up being 14 deaths.
Yeah, just because it takes the police so long to get there, yeah. And, you talk about the teachers being armed thing, and people go, oh, no, that would be a disaster because kids would be grabbing the guns and teachers would be doing this and that. And I think it's Utah has had it for, I think, over 15 years. If a teacher has a concealed carry permit, then they're allowed to carry a gun in the school. And all that time, nothing. No school shootings, no teachers going crazy and shooting the kid, no kids grabbing the gun. It's not happening. If you look at the portion of people in the population who commit violent crimes with a firearm, police are something like 1/20th as likely to commit a violent crime with a firearm. And concealed carry permit holders are, I think, like 1/10 as likely as police. So I mean, it's a lot. It's even safer for concealed carry holders.
Yeah.
Than it is for police.
As a libertarian in my school, I thought about forming like a libertarian conservative alliance, just getting the conservatives and libertarians to agree on something and kind of having a club. But after a while, I'm like, no, my school is so liberal, they would probably just end up screeching about it. I think I said I was at like an LGBT club there or whatever, and I asked a lot of people, I said, what's your opinion on gay people arming themselves to defend themselves? And about 40 to 45% agreed with the statement of arming themselves, while the other percentage said, oh, we shouldn't have to arm ourselves, teach homophobes not to shoot up gay clubs.
Okay, first of all, it being a gay club had nothing to do with that. I think we've covered that. But I mean, why do I have to lock my door? Just teach people not to rob houses. I mean,
There was an inventor who was killed by their own invention because he tried kicking the newspaper press or whatever to get something to go in it, and his leg got caught up in it. And a lot of people try to say, oh, that's an example of how machinery needed to be regulated. And I'm like, it gets safer over time. No invention is safe at first. It just improves over time. Like the light bulb, the arc lights and stuff like that. They were dangerous to eyes, but eventually it got better over time.
And Rogging1 wants to know what my problem with the Americans with Disabilities Act is. And I've said this before, that was kind of like my last little bit of statism that I had to kind of overthrow to become a pure libertarian. Because, when it passed, I thought, hey, that's a good thing. Now people with disabilities can get around better. But I mean, there was already a trend of people putting in wheelchair ramps because guess what? They don't want to lose a sale. They want people to be able to access it. But the Americans with Disabilities Act turned a lot of that on its head because, like, they were figuring out ways to hire disabled people, and figure out how they could help them do their jobs and whatever. But then the ADA passes, and it just completely reversed that because there were all these requirements for things you had to do to hire a disabled person. They were that much more expensive to hire. And a lot of lawyers told these firms not to hire disabled people because it's a lawsuit waiting to happen if there's like some little jot or tittle that you didn't comply with.
Yeah.
They could come in and take down your whole business. And you even had shyster lawyers who were going around just looking at, I don't think that wheelchair ramp is the right slope or whatever, not based on any actual complaints from any disabled people, but they'd go around and then file all these big suits against. I mean, it was just horrible the way it turned out.
There was Penn and Teller's Bullshits. It's a great show. That's actually what kind of turned me into a libertarian a bit. but they actually tested it with the iron lung. They went around with an old vintage iron lung trying to go into businesses. I wish that show was still on, though.
Yeah, that was great.
We don't want to see our relatives or siblings come back from war with their legs blown off and PTSD and all this shell shock and chronic pain and stuff. We don't want to see that shit because a lot of it was based on a lie, be it the WMDs in Iraq and stuff. Why should they go off and fight a war because Bush lied?
Well, it wasn't just Bush. It was all sorts of people in, the FBI and the CIA and stuff like that. And that's what gets me, because that's the only thing they're putting up for the reason why we know that Trump colluded with Russia to hack the election. Oh, because we've got these people who say they have evidence. They won't show it to us, but they say, I'm like, these are the same people who lied to us about Iraq. They lied to us about, NSA spying on us. They went up, into Congress into congressional hearings under oath and lied under oath about it, and we're just supposed to trust them on this? And oh my God, it was it Dick Cheney who just died, or
I'm not sure.
Oh God, one of them just died, and even people like that Cortez woman, Miss Socialist, was saying about how he was so wonderful. He was and I think like the Washington Post called him, like a champion of the people and for human rights and things. Oh, John McCain. Thanks, David. Yeah, that was it.
John McCain.
Yeah. And I'm like, what are you talking about? The guy was a paranoid warmonger.
Yeah. Yeah, I kept on.
Even people on the left are just saying about how wonderful he was. No, he wasn't. Sorry, he wasn't.
Whenever I try to bring up anti-war and libertarian points and just the idea of self-armament and stuff like that, people are like, well, the military is different than the people and they should be allowed to have the guns and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, what if that military becomes tyrannical? And they're like, well, they won't. We have a democratic government. And I'm like, have you not seen the Weimar Republic?
The Trollbucks is saying, isn't the U.S. a republic? Well, I mean, it was designed to be a republic, but the thing is, it's really become an oligarchy, and that's what happens anytime you have a power structure. You've got people who are going to take it, and that's what you have, and that's why they're generating all of this white versus black. Black people, you're held down because of white people. Women, you're held down because of the patriarchy and things like that. It's all a distraction, so that we don't realize that the real enemy are, the people in power, the Hillary Clintons and the Donald Trumps and all of that. This is like what people always say whenever, there's a hurricane or an earthquake or somewhere there's this disaster, and people come in with all this bottled water and start selling, bottled water for like $5 a pop or something like that. And they go like, well, you're price gouging, you're exploiting those people. And I'm like, okay, how much water have you brought into that area? Okay, because if that figure is none, then I don't want to hear from you. I mean, how expensive is it to get bottled water into the desert or into a disaster area or whatever?
Yeah.
Assuming they let you in and don't turn back like FEMA keeps doing every time they show up. Like, I know they did this with Hurricane Andrew. I think it was Winn-Dixie. And I think Walmart tried to do the same thing after Katrina. They were sending just truckloads in of stuff to donate, and FEMA turned them around and said, no, you can't come in. It's like, what? How are you helping? You're in the way. And I'm looking at what Harry Alexander in the chat saying about it. But I mean, the idea here, it's called marginal utility. If you're in the desert and all you have is 1 gallon of water, and that's got to get you through however long it takes to get to the desert, that's really precious to you, and you're going to save that for drinking water, and it's really valuable. And so you might be willing to pay $100 for it. But the more water you get, the less valuable it is. And once you start getting more water, then you start not just drinking it, but you start bathing, you start washing your car, watering your lawn, things that are less and less important the more than you get of it. And that's what marginal utility says, is that the price of water is the price of the next unit, not the first. Because if you want drinking water, you're just going to pay, the same price. You're not going to pay $100 for that first gallon and then, lesser prices for all of it. You're going to pay the low price based on, how plentiful water is in your area. So that's marginal utility there. It's a price support. And when that's below equilibrium, you have the demand being greater than the supply. And so what happens is the first, 2 people or whatever to go and get one. We're seeing this right now, in fact, in North Carolina. My wife says, that people cleared out the bottled water there in a couple of days, and everyone's coming in complaining about, why isn't there bottled water? And it's like, well, the first people who got here got it. And it's like, when are you gonna get some more in? It's like, well, we're not, because Harris Teeter is sending the bottled water to the coast where people are actually going to need it. It's going to hit here. We don't know how hard, but it's not going to be as hard as, the people on the coast. And of course they complain about that, but I mean, that's how it is. You got to send the supplies to where they're needed, and they have the incentive to do that. I mean, Walmart was just stocking, just basic cheap gallons of water, filtered water or whatever. I think I got some spring water from that and some distilled water, but they were just stocking what they could, but most of it's going to the coast because that's where the biggest problem is. So that's where the biggest demand for it is. Yeah, it's really ironic to read Lysander Spooner writing about this stuff in the 19th century, and he's talking about how big government has gotten and how terrible and tyrannical it is. And we compare that to today, I think we'd all kind of rather the government be the size it was in Spooner's day, because it's just gotten that much worse since then.
Yeah, it is very interesting how we look back on how people perceived big government back then, but we would rather have it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder what Spooner would have had to say about things like income tax.
Yeah, Spooner would have freaking had a heart attack, for God's sakes.
Well, I think if he could see today's society, he would say, what is wrong with you people? You are so rich. No one is suffering. No one is starving. These poor people you're pointing to and saying how horrible their life is better than most people lived, in my time. And you're complaining about it, and you're wanting government to do more, and you've made this government so huge you've got a $20 trillion debt. What is wrong with you people?
I actually recommended Basquiat the Law to one of my history teachers, and they said, I don't know who Basquiat is. And I'm like,
wow.
Wait, you teach European history and you don't know who Basquiat is?
Well, it's not in the government-approved curriculum that he's reading from.
Yeah, it's very interesting. We have Common Core up here, and it's bullshit.
Oh, God. I mean, the charter school my girls go to, before Common Core, they had their own curriculum, which was great and wonderful, and they were one of the best schools in the state. And then the state mandated Common Core on all schools, including charters, and it actually set them back. And, I mean, it's like the students don't like it, the teachers don't like it, the administration doesn't like it, even the teachers' unions have come out against Common Core. I'm like, who likes this thing?
Yeah, a lot of people come out against it, and I've talked to teachers about this. Do you like Common Core or do you not? And they always are hesitant to voice their opinion about it.
The charter school aren't, they'll tell you. It's just amazing because a lot, I can look at it and I can kind of see what they're doing, and I can see what their goal is. Their goal is to get kids to kind of think through things like math problems and understand the concepts behind it. But the way they implement it it's just more rote learning. Do these steps, and this is the way you do it. And
yeah, it's kind of like coloring in between the lines, no margin for error, even though error allows people to understand a concept better, be it mistakes.
Yeah, well, and it's also the fact that there's more than one way to accomplish something. And a lot of it should be about thinking way through and about being creative about how you attack these problems. But, every time government comes up with a curriculum, that's exactly what it doesn't do. I think that the basis for certainly math classes, but maybe even a lot others, starting with kindergarten, is teaching kids to code.
Yeah.
Yeah, but when you learn to code, you learn reasoning skills, you learn critical thinking, you learn problem solving. You know, you can learn things like decision trees, things you can actually use in your actual day-to-day life.
It's very interesting. I learned a lot via, be it reasoning skills, stuff like that, even creativity, trying to solve problems and such.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of lateral thinking involved, and that's really what a proper math class would be about things. It's not just about, by rote, this is how you solve a math problem. It's, here's something kind of funky and out of the way, and you kind of have to think laterally to solve it.
Yeah, it's usually our routine starts with read out of a book, do the problems, listen to a half-an-hour lecture, then do online homework, and it kind of gets boring after a while. It's not really anything like that. And the thing is, they never really, whenever I try to apply, be it financial concepts to math, they used to kind of say, oh, don't apply financial concepts and stuff like that, even though we were doing financial concepts.
Yeah.
It's like, don't overthink it. And I'm like, I'm not overthinking it.
Yeah, and I mean, money management is another skill that people could really use that they could teach in schools, and they generally don't. Because a lot of reasons, one big reason why there are poor people in this country is just because they don't know how to manage money. No one ever taught them that. And when you ask, these people are well-to-do, how come they're so well-to-do from generation to generation? Because generally, the parents on their own are teaching their kids money management. They're homeschooling at least that portion of it. But I mean, if your parents don't know how to do it, how can they teach you? All right, it's after 10 o'clock. I need to sign off for the evening.
Well, it was nice being on the live stream with you, Shane.
Yeah, thanks for joining me, and thanks to everyone in the chat room. And I mean, this is for the patrons. We only had one come in, and he didn't really say anything, David. But thanks for the support, and thanks to everyone in the chat room, and thanks for everyone who is viewing this and supporting my channel, even if it's just by viewing and sharing the videos, hitting like and subscribe and spreading them around. So until next time, stay strong and be free.